Hello, my name is Brant. Last name is Hunt. Today is the 11th day of April 2021. This is my third video of the day. I am taking some time today and talking about very pertinent information that you need to be aware of and how you need to understand the times that we live in. So, this particular video will be dealing with what I call financial issues because I don't want people to make foolish mistakes that will cost them possibly their lives, not being prepared. So, most of what I've studied the past and history and what I'm getting from what I see is the total collapse is going to take place here in the United States, in the Western world. I don't know when this is going to happen, but I wanted just to share pertinent information that you need to be moving. You need to be aware of what's going on around you. You need to understand that this whole thing with COVID-19 is actually a show, but it's actually to bring down the whole Western world. I have looked into other issues. I'm a poli-sci major, political science. My father ran a business, owned a business, and I ran it for him for many years. I understood certain things about finances at that point, at a very young age, knowing the power of the state and what it can do to you, and how it can transform your lives. So let's get to the point. I do have this recorded not only on Facebook with my name, Brant Hunt. I also have a YouTube channel called Discerning What Is True, and it's both being simulcast right now on both those particular channels. Unfortunately, Facebook usually is a live broadcast. YouTube is a delayed broadcast by a few minutes. So, as being 60 years old, I can go back into history and talk to you about my grandparents, especially on my mother's side, who went through the Great Depression in the 1930s and how what we call the situation became really bad at that point of time. And I remember talking to them at a young age, and they told me a story. My grandparents owned a farm, actually owned over 100 acres. And you think, wow, that's not a whole lot, but it is a lot. And my granddaddy on my mom's side was involved in what I call simply is growing corn. I think he grew some soybeans and he had some pigs. He was a small farmer compared to what we call out west, Midwest, but he was not what I call on the other side of my family, my dad's side, which was a truck farmer. He was a truck farmer because he would grow perishable foods that would go to Charleston. My dad would go as a young man, young teenager, to Charleston to sell the goods to the Charleston markets or to the places that sold the food there in Charleston. This is the reason why it's pertinent for you to understand something. If you live in cities, you're more dependent upon the system than you are in the country. That's a fact. You are not dependent upon water except from rain, but some farmers actually have their own irrigation systems and that type of thing. But you're not dependent upon food because actually you grow your own food. And what's going to happen in the near future here in America is going to have enormous impact financially throughout the world. We have a government that has lost its complete mind by printing money. We already have printed probably since the administration has come to power, when I was close to $4 trillion. And they're going to do another $2 trillion here. This is suicide of the country economically. And this is the destruction of the dollar. Don't people don't realize what's happening before their eyes. There's still people being laid off work, hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people out of work, and those jobs are gone. This benefits those, what we call the big box stores, such as Walmart, Target, the grocery stores, the big chains there, but it basically destroys what I call the mom and pop shops. You're running out of time, folks. You need to be aware that you need to have your own garden and you need to have your own way of defending yourself. Probably not from the police or the military, but possibly with those who are actually live near you, who are not prepared. People who do all kinds of dirty and evil things is because they become desperate. And we don't live in a age or a world like we did when my grandmother and granddad lived. There was a moral integrity about people back then that there is no longer there now. This was done on purpose by the educational system, the dumbing down, the realization of people simply becoming more and more dependent upon the system. One thing you need to do if you have the opportunity, you need to pay off your credit card debt as soon as possible. With that meaning simply is you are a slave to the debtor system. And if you can pay it off, pay it off. Hopefully you own your own house. And most people are not going to like this, what I'm sharing. But this is real. This is real life, folks. This is reality. I've gone through certain things in my life because I'm here at this time to warn you. I'm not here to play games. And I'm not here to produce fear porn. This is not fear porn, folks. The collapse of this country is going to happen. I don't know if it's going to happen this year. I'm well aware of certain things that are going on financially. And there are some sites I go to, and I'm going to share one of them right now to show with you what it's about. So this is it. This is the site I go to. I go to other sites. This is the Atlantis report. This is about the Fed. Let me be very clear to you. The Fed has nothing to do with the government. It's a group of private bankers who have taken over, and there's no such thing as a figurehead of what I would call of the Treasury Department. They print money with nothing behind it. In the past, simply is that your money was not like this 120 years ago. First, it didn't have these funky colors. The other thing simply was it was redeemable in silver or gold. It is no longer silver or gold redemption at the banks. In other words, you took your cash money and you would get from the banks, you would get a $10 worth coin that was worth a $10 bill. Or if it was $25 or $100, it'd be based upon $100 worth of gold, silver. That's all gone. That happened when the Feds in the 1930s, during the Great Depression, the gradual takeover of the whole economy. So these people who do this simply are in the business of making money. They could care less about who you are. So these guys tend to put what I call a video a day, maybe more than that. The most important things you need to get if you want to live and survive through the trying times is simply this. You need to have some type of water system. Either I have a Berkey filtering system that I have city water. I have filters in it that deal with the water and also the fluoride in the system. And the filters are replaceable, and you replace those every year or less. The other key simply is you need to have food and a way of cooking it no matter what. If it's be able to cook it either by propane, by wood fires, or some other way that actually allows you not to be upon the system. So it is important for you to understand that with this taking place, it's going to be a serious deal. That is, meaning that simply is you need to get as much your money, that is paper money, out of your banks, because they're going to be the next thing in the future to collapse. And what do I mean by that? Dollars will eventually become digital, just like the Chinese are gradually moving to. It's going to be based upon social scores if you're in the system. So if you want to try to survive, you're going to have to use paper money, and you're eventually going to have to use precious money, precious coins, and that thing in the future too. And that's why 4 states in the union have already began to move in that direction to be able to take tax money to be taken by gold or silver. These states are Oklahoma, Utah, Wyoming, and I think Texas. I might be wrong on Texas. I take that back. I don't think Texas is. I think it's another state in the union. Kansas, Oklahoma, Utah, and I think Idaho is the other state. Those 4 states are now going, they're moving in that direction. As things get worse, those states, more states will join into this because simply is the paper money won't be worth anything. So this is going to be how I understand the way it is. And part of this is because I've studied history. I took a class in college. I remember it well. German history and how the Dutch mark fell and it inflated, and that people had to go, that workers that had work went to the bank twice a day. They went at 12 o'clock at the daytime and deposited their money and ran and got food. And then at 4 or 5 o'clock at the end of the day, they got money again, got paid, and bought food. I'm sorry, they didn't go to the bank. They actually went to grocery stores or the market to get their food. Twice a day, because the inflation rate was going, it was taking place quickly. Just like that. Just like the situation that's taking place in Venezuela, now it's taking place in Argentina in the past, and in the recent history, the Zimbabwe also is taking place. You say, well, this can't happen here in America. Baloney. It can't happen here. You have the government that is spending money like it's nobody's business, and it's just being thrown away because simply is they're trying to continue to pay off the debt, and when they produce more dollars, they can pay those debts off to foreign countries or whatever. But those dollars are becoming worth less and less, and gradually will not be worth anything because other countries will not take those dollars. Let me explain something critical. In order for the United States, it being a country that's had this power since the last 65 years, more than that, actually 70 years, being the country that everything is pegged upon. So people wanted dollars because it held power. It held its denomination. It didn't move. It kept this value. Well, now only 54, just recently, 54% of that countries are taking that money now. Yes, it's still the majority. But other coin systems, money systems are now being taken. Yuan in China, the euro in Europe. Those are the two key playmakers. Let me explain something else. There are actually 5 countries that are competing against the United States, and these countries have bought an enormous amount of gold in the last 12 years, tons of it. And those are India, China, Russia, Brazil, and a small partner is South Africa. These are the BRIC countries. This represents Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Those are the 5 major countries. The reason why South Africa is key is simply that South Africa produces a lot of gold and silver. They still mine a lot of that there in their particular country. So that's why they're a part of this. It's critical for you to understand that almost these countries are far more independent than you realize. The United States' glory and days are over with. We no longer the economic power that we once were. And the times that I called on customers in business with my dad, I would call on them, the plants, and I would sell things to them, basically products that are what I call industrial tools. So a lot of that's gone. The textile industry is gone here in the South. Very few plants are still allowed. A major plant probably would be Milliken. Is probably the last takeholder of that textile industry here. The reason why they specialize in certain things have kept their little niche. The furniture industry in North Carolina is gone. So these are major 2 players that were involved in the economic situations in the 80s, 90s, until our great President Clinton, did this. It's called NAFTA, North American Free Trade Association. And what transpired simply was it was allowed the largest corporations to build their factories in Mexico, to import it here without taxes being charged, and competing with their competitors here in America who had to pay taxes and had to pay, taxes and higher wages to these people. So these people who are nothing but greedy, seek to destroy everything, chose and bought off these senators and congressmen by this treaty. Now, let me explain one other thing. The United Nations is what's really running this country. They're really what I call presidents now are basically figureheads. They're no longer important as they have been in the past. And you really shouldn't look to presidents to being an important person anyway, because simply he's just one man. Now, he sets the agenda, so to speak, but you have other congressmen and senators who are what we would call 535 people that are involved in the Senate and House. 435 in the House, and the Senate being 100. And each House member represents population, and each senator per state, and each senator represents 2 per each state. So Alaska has 2, Idaho has 2, the small state of New Hampshire has 2. So all have equality there. So what's taking place is simply it's been a slow, and I did a video on Woodrow Wilson, which was a traitor to our country in so many ways. It's ridiculous. Franklin Roosevelt is part of that too, but indeed, Wilson was the one who really set this whole agenda going on with what we call major deals that took place, not only us entering the World War I, but also simply is changing everything. And suddenly we have a Fed, which has nothing to do with the federal government. We have what we call taxes that are now being garnished on wages, which was not taking place beforehand. There was such a thing as income tax under the Lincoln administration during the war in order for them to, quote unquote, pay for the debts that they had incurred with the war between the states. But that eventually was alleviated, and we went away from that. So what's happened simply is we are run by a group of private bankers who could care less about the country, and they make profits because simply they print money out of nothing. So they don't have any silver and gold themselves backed. The other thing simply is they actually charge the interest. The government is paying interest on the dollars that they charge, the bill, the making of them. And they can print them as many as they want because there's nothing behind them. There's no silver or gold. And that's how we've gotten ourselves in this situation. We also know simply that Social Security was implemented by the Roosevelt situation, his administration. He was involved in simply as the Second World War. Whoever tells you this is a liar. Let me explain this to you. They say that war is good for economy. Yes, it's good for guess who? The quote unquote military defense industry, and that's the only ones it helps. Nothing else. And people lose their lives fighting a war. They're senseless. You see. In fact, the reality simply would be better in a lot of ways is that the leaders of the country go out themselves and fight the wars. Okay, you need to stop believing in government because government itself is a lie. You yourself are the government. You self-govern yourself. You are the authority. You always will be if you take your power in that and understand who you are. If you don't, that's how you become more and more a slave. And we're in the situation here in America simply is that most people, if not almost all people, are in debt. And debt is slavery. That's just simply what it means. You owe somebody else. And how this works, and it becomes a major problem, is that people now are relying on the government now to give them stimulus checks. Well, if you were wise about it, if you take that money, you need to take that money and pay off your debts. You see. But they're going to still tax you for that. You see. They're going to tax you, that $1,400 they give you, such and such. It's important for you to understand what is going on. So why did I say take money out of the banks? Because simply it's your money. And if you have less than $10,000 in the bank, you're not going to get much at all, folks, out of it if the banks collapse. You follow? You won't get what you think you're going. And it won't be worth what it used to be either. Go into a store these days, and if you buy a liter of a Coke product, in the last week, I've noticed the price has gone up. It used to be $1 for a liter of Coca-Cola or Pepsi, whichever way you want to look at it. The Coke products are now $1.10. So there's a 10% increase, just that, on one product. Okay. So now, if people are in debt, how are they going to pay their debts? You see, if Joel over here owes on his mortgage, but he doesn't have a job, how is he going to pay off? And then if the banks don't get their money, it's a reciprocating. It's a domino effect, folks. It works that way. It's very simple. You need to understand economics. And so what happens simply is if the banks can't deal their situation, then they go belly up. And what they'll do, they'll know it's coming, and they'll just take your money, and you will lose it. You see? You'll lose that. Now, if you're able to do this, this is the wise thing to do, is you have that money. If you have money in the bank, you need to be buying food. You need to be buying food in order for the future because it will be the most important thing for you. You need to understand simply is such a thing as what we call needs and what we call simply is wants. That's over with the wants, folks. It's time to look at the needs. You need to understand you need to grow your own garden, you grow your own fruit, vegetables, be dependent on no one except yourselves. You see, you need to also understand simply is as this continues to get worse, you're going to have protection from those who may want to steal from you. You see, because they don't have any food, because they didn't take the precautions. They didn't take the warning seriously. And that is why, in some ways, it's advantageous for you to live out in the country somewhat, although eventually that may be a problem in the future when people become more and more hungry. This is why you need to be out of the cities, because cities are dependent upon farmers and getting that transportation system in, either by rail or by trucks. Simple as that. We're already seeing the breakdown of the systems taking place on the West Coast, especially Portland and Seattle. These cities are becoming more and more dependent, and what we have is leadership, which is incompetent, who want this to happen. they themselves want this to be destroyed. They hate America and what it stands for. And so what they're going to do simply is they're going to allow it to get worse and worse. This is why many police officers and departments are no longer in existence, because simply is they're no longer wanted. And those who are the city councils and mayors have decided simply is that they're not going to pay these people for that, because they have their own agendas, you see. And so we are not only we're not really dealing with communism here, we're dealing with what we call communitarianism. Because the reality simply is the individual never counts in communism or in communitarianism. What is communitarianism? It's very simple. It's a belief system that the individual does not have rights anymore, that the community now has all the rights, and we've now become what we call a democracy. And that's the problem. People have been taught this a long time ago. We're a democracy 100 years ago. They've been programming you for a long time. See, whereas what was established was a republic, you see. It was based upon the minority had rights as well as the majority. Well, democracy is simply mob rule. That's just all it is simply the mob rules everything. And so if you're in the minority, you're no longer going to count. And that's what communitarianism. It's a community. You see, it's this idea, simply we all work together, such and such, but we're all going to be slaves on the plantation now, far deeper than what we were even 25 years ago. Because people are not aware of what's going on, because they've been watching all these movies, all this stuff on TV, all these things on YouTube or whatever, playing around, and not looking at reality and closing your eyes and closing their ears and not speaking out and saying such and such about anything, about what's going on. So when I say this, it's critical for you to get money out of the bag. You need to be able to look at things that simply is paying off your bills each month. Meaning simply is if you have a bill to say, let's say there's $675, then you need to leave no more than $750 or $800 in the bank and take care of that. And then you deposit more money, such and such, into the bank the next month, so that you do not lose what you may have $4,000 or $5,000, $6,000 in the bank, and they will take it all. So this is critical for you to understand and what you need to do. They're already moving in this direction already. The banks are 1 or 2 steps ahead of you, and you need to be aware of this clearly in what they're doing. They have actually, I got something here recently. My bank simply gave me a new card, a debit card. Again, this is implemented not only what I call 2 years ago, it's now a new one. So what is transpiring here simply is that they may simply limit you to whatever you can only take out so much a day or a week. You ever thought about that? Are you aware? If you have family, are you telling your families this? Are you making them aware of what's going on? Simply is because they need to know. It doesn't hurt to buy food, folks. It never has. It never will neither, because it's there. You can eat it. You see, you can eat it out of a can, such and such, da-da-da, whatever. But if you don't have it, you don't have it. You need to have a way of not only being able to protect yourself, not only to be able to feed yourself, but also simply is to have water to drink. All these are clear indications of certain things you need to have. You need to have ways of being able, if you're going to cook, have ways of cooking food, either by wood, by propane, or either natural gas or either electricity. But we know simply is if you do not pay your bills, electric, natural gas, or whatever, they'll cut it off. They're already making plans here in the state of South Carolina with the power company simply is that they want the government to protect their people who come out and turn off the power, because, see, people are going to be angry and they're going to be hostile because they don't have a job and they're not able to pay for anything with power. And the power companies are saying, we can't give you any more power anymore because you're now 6 months in arrears or whatever, and you have no money to pay us. We can't be in business this way. And so they're going to come in and they're actually asking the government here, already making decisions. They know what's coming down the pipe. And if they know, you need to be aware of what's coming down the pipe. Okay? You need to understand, you need to take your power. Simply as you don't need to be voting anymore. Voting is totally useless. It's a system. It's a belief system. All beliefs are not truths. Truth is the only thing that's actually true, and it doesn't have to have any support because it's self-evident. It's clear. Well, belief is not that way. It's based upon a belief that you believe these things, but you're not sure it's a truth. So what I'm explaining to you now is critical for you to understand. So please, either you can work in a community that is with other like-minded human beings on a area that you support yourself, like a co-op, and working that way, or you're going to be on your own. Now, I have already warned a couple of my neighbors about this. I warned them even before this situation with the COVID-19 situation, knowing simply this was a ramping up. It's not going to get any better, so to speak. It's just going to gradually become more and more pressure put upon you, and with people less and less working. I will say this clearly that here where I live at, there are people who have jobs. There are people who it's not been hit here as much because part of this is what we call the Southeastern Corridor. Part of it goes through what we call Charlotte, Winston-Salem, back to Greenville, Spartanburg, and all the way down to Atlanta, the I-85 corridor. And this is part of their program, such and such. So there are jobs here that they're not elsewhere, okay? Meaning simply is there are decent jobs here. I'm not saying they're great paying jobs, but they're jobs that simply is you can continue to stay on your feet. I don't know how long that's going to last, but it is far better here than other parts of the country. You see, certain parts of the Midwest and certain places on the West they don't have the infrastructure, and they're basically the governors there are not going. They're in so much debt. California is, and other states in the West. They don't care. They really don't care. They see themselves as the oligarchies. They're the most important people, and you don't mean anything to them. So what I'm trying to explain to you is life saving. You need to have also certain herbs in your cupboard, whatever you want to call it, to help in case you get sick or something of that nature, because they're not going to be hospitals around that are going to help you out in the future neither. We're headed to third world status quickly here. And we know that America is the key deal, because once America falls, it's going to have a reciprocating effect. And it's just like the dominoes. If you ever play dominoes, you knock one of them down, it just knocks all the rest of them down. It eventually hits and destroys the whole economy, which is what these people want. They want to destroy things. I'm not trying to feed you fear. I'm trying to warn you to protect yourself, because time is getting short. You follow me? So it's important as simply is that you look at these things and say, okay, I need to do this. I need to do that. If you keep waiting, not only what's happening now, the inflation is gradually taking more and more. So it costs more to buy something. Okay. And it gradually gets more and more, such and such. Eventually, where we get our food from these foreign countries, they will no longer take the dollar. And when they don't take the dollar, you won't get food from those countries. Are you aware of that? Do you know how this has been set up? The system being dependent upon each other, the countries being dependent upon one another. So in other words, if we get oranges from Peru or South Africa and we're not able to pay in what we would call paper money that's sound, then they're not going to take our money. They'll send it somewhere else, their crops. This is the precarious situation it's become in this country. And it's a slow death, and it's been going on for quite some time, and people are not aware of it. If you still can get precious money, precious metals, it is to your advantage to have that. You follow? Again, this is for your protection. Key another. If you no longer have water, where are you going to get water? Well, you need to have some type of containers, drums that can collect rainwater. And you need to have a filtering system again to be able to drink clean water. That is pertinent for you to understand. Okay? All these things are important because once it goes, communications, everything else, which is this country's highly dependent upon, the internet, all that is dependent, and you won't have any source. Do you have a reliable radio? You able to listen to not only local radio, but are you able to quote unquote listen to world radio? Something of what we call shortwave radio, in order to be aware of what's going on. They may not tell you the truth neither, but you have some tangent to know something is going on. I understand simply is that Australia is almost, and we're being the same thing, China is buying up the whole planet. I'm not saying I don't want to go on a point and say they're an evil country, because the United States put itself in this situation. Our leaders did this. You can go back to the 1970s with Henry Kissinger and that piece of bullshit he is. And actually, Ford went there, Nixon went there to soften relationships. Eventually, it's just paved a way for industry to build products in China. Are you aware that these industries here in America, they have cheap labor over there? The point simply is those patents have been given to the Chinese government. Literally, corporations have sold their soul to make money and to make make products in a cheap area. So they actually keep people, that is the Chinese, themselves are slaves also. They're actually on campus somewhat, on a plant, living there as slaves. Just like old system that it was in the South and the North, being on a plantation where the crops were raised, cotton, tobacco, and other things. So we're on a plantation back then, and it's not cotton and tobacco and other corn and stuff like that, but now it simply is making products. But that will eventually fall apart because no one can buy those things anymore because they want to be afforded. Plus the system won't work because if you don't have internet, what's the use to having a computer? You see. So everything's been digitalized, such and such, and makes it to. We know that the experiment has been taking place in China for some time now, what we call social credits. And so if you don't get along, and this is part of the whole deal, you will have to compromise yourself and be a part of the system. By being dependent upon the system, by you depending on them as you're getting the stimulus checks, it will become more and more very aware. You become aware that basically what's happening simply is you'll be given just enough at first to basically survive. And eventually, with the inflationary rate, you won't be able to survive because you will realize that the dollar will continue to lose value. The government does this on purpose because it's trying to pay off its debts to what they owe foreign countries. With this situation also makes hostilities take place simply as, oh, well, you owe us such and such. You owe us $1 trillion, we don't want your phony money anymore. We want real assets. And so they'll take land, you see, or they'll take whatever precious metals the country has, gold and silver. So I've been watching for a long time, and this particular channel, I think I shared it with you here, is to do with, let's see if we can get it coming up here. Let's see, I think I did, but there are other sites that talk about certain things. You can see how this country is in so much trouble because it no longer is able to provide essentials. Another group of people I listen to is a company called, not company, but Kidko, Kitco News. And this is, again, to explain what you need to do. You need to educate yourself on what's going on. And the Atlantis Report, there are other groups such and such, but Kidko is one of the ones I look in the Atlantis Report, something of that nature. And So I wanted to point these things out. Again, I'm not trying to make you fearful, but I, as myself saying to myself here, I've got to share this information. You know why I've got to share this information? Because I don't want, as I look at things, I don't want your blood on my hands. I warned you. That's all I can do. It's your decision. And if you don't believe me, that's your choice. But if I don't say anything to you about it and the knowledge I have, and I don't share it with you, then I really haven't put out my heart and to love you and care enough about you. Say you need to do something. You need to do something, even if it's small. You need to do something. That's how critical this is. I remember taking an economics class in college, and just basically I knew how business worked. And the lady who was the class professor was bragging about in the future there would be service jobs. And I argued with her and saying, excuse me, if you're going to have those service jobs, you're going to have industry, you're going to have industry, you're going to have the fishing industry, you're going to have the lumber industry, you're going to have farmers, and you're going to have the mining industry. There are 5 key deals. People now actually talk about what we call tourism. Tourism is not an industry, folks. They call it industry, but if people aren't working in decent jobs, they're not going to tour the city or state. They don't have the money. You see, it's all that. But we have all these fancy words and people don't think about what they mean. And so tourism is only good for good economies. Once there's a bad economy, no one goes anywhere because they don't have any money. They can't afford it. Plus, there won't be a way of moving transportation-wise simply because you can't afford to go certain places, not even to your back town. And all these plans are being made simply as they're doing all this in front of your eyes, and you keep pretending that nothing's going to happen, And I talk to people about this, and most just simply, they don't care. They become very complacent. They're not taking responsibility. So I just want you to know these things, and it is pertinent you do to understand simply, no, there are going to be runs on the banks in the future. It's coming. And the sad part simply is that it's going to be far worse than the first depression we had in the 1920s and 30s. And their Keynesian type of economy, this is what they've been doing, keeps spending money to get the economy to get going, when that's all a false reality. And most people just think it's going to go away. Same thing with Christianity I've talked about. They think that, they're going to be raptured away. They all believe this stuff, but it's not a truth, folks. It's a belief. Beliefs are not truths. Never have been. People are going to be hurting in many ways. And it's sad. It's really sad. And this country has fell apart simply is by what I call it. I call it communitarianism. You can call it communism. The United Nations is simply a communist takeover in a stealth way. People don't know that. And one time simply is why. Here's a question. Here's a good question. Just think about this. Why did the United States and the Allies need Russia to fight in the Second World War? You do know that in the World War I, the Russians quit. They went home and no longer fought in the First World War. You're aware of that. The Second World War, it didn't take that place, but the United States, Britain, France, and other countries were fighting the Italians, the Japanese, and the Germans, the three major powers at that point, the Axis. At one time it was called the Allies force, and then it became the UN force. That's what happened in the last part of the war. But the reason why did we why do we support a country that was actually communist? Think about that. Why did we have Russia or the Soviet Union to be a part of that? Because it was done on purpose, folks. It was to allow them to take over other countries. It's clear. They were not in agreement with the American way of life. You're well aware that the industrialists and the bankers are the ones that created the Soviet Union and what communism does and the moral breakdown of the state that took place there. That the bankers gave tons of money to set up a government that could not survive. But then, in World War II, Ford Manufacturing built a plant there for them to build tanks. Are you aware of that? Are you aware that the United States gave tons and tons of materials to the Soviet Union to fight in the war? And then what happened was a particular general named Eisenhower prevented us from keeping the Eastern European countries free and allowed these countries to be taken over by the Soviet Union. And then we had the Cold War, the so-called Cold War, that the United States and Soviet Union kept building up armaments and they spent their money to gross domestic product and building armaments to fight one another, which we never have fought. So it actually destroyed both the countries. And the Soviet Union was the first to go, and the United States is going to be the next to go because of all the money we keep spending on military, on quote-unquote foreign enemies, when there aren't any foreign enemies, folks. You see, the real enemies are actually here in our own country, destroying it from within. Most countries usually capitulate within. They don't collapse because sometimes in the fighting outside, they do, but a lot of them fall from within. That was what they were hoping to do in 1848 when the communists tried to revolt, and those countries in France, Germany, all these countries tried to revolt to create a communist state and eventually a one world government at that point. It didn't work, but they never stopped. They never have stopped. They never have. They never will stop because their whole hopes is to be a part of one world government. So my point here again is to express to you that you do need to be aware that you need to have money in your hands and you need to use that wisely and understand what you need to get rid of the thrills, folks. You see, you don't need a brand new car. Are you aware? Are you well aware of people buying brand new cars at this time, during this time we're going through, when many people are out of jobs? You know, they're actually giving credit to people who actually don't have jobs to buy a car. What a foolish thing to do. It's all to make, keep these companies going alive, such and such. And people do this because they want to impress other people as though they have something more. What a childish way of looking at things. What a ridiculous way of looking at things and thinking, oh, I've got this brand new car, such and such. Big deal. It won't be worth anything in the future, you see, because no one can afford it. You see. Well, this is my third broadcast today, and I think my voice is getting a little tired, and I need to probably quit here. Just wanted to share with you what is important in life. You need to love one another. You need to share with your siblings or friends or family members about what's coming. If they don't listen to you, that's fine. You at least warned them. But again, my point simply is I'm not doing this because I want you to live in fear. I want you to be prepared for what's coming, and that's to protect you and care about you. I don't do it to bring fear. That's not my objective. So thank you for listening. I appreciate you being here, and you have a good night. You take care.